Glad you could rejoin us. Carlton Palmer is still with us all the way from China. James Gregg from just around the corner. He joins us as well for this, specifically to talk really about Sheffield United and the anxious week he and many other Blades endured last week. Anxieties that have not gone completely away, but my goodness, 2 victories doesn't half help. But before that, we'll rejoin Carlton Palmer as promised to discuss the affairs of his former club, or one of his former clubs, Sheffield Wednesday, have been undergoing yet more managerial turmoil lately. And I wonder what his take is on the runners and riders for the job and what he thinks would be the best course of action. So, Carlton, over there in Shanghai, the floor is yours. What's your view?
I've said this for a while. The chairman needs to listen. I don't want to. It gets very difficult because whatever you say, you get accused of criticising the chairman. I've backed him. He's put his money where his mouth is. But it's time he got somebody in there to steer him in the right direction. He has put an awful lot of money in the club, but whoever's advising him is advising him incorrectly on football matters, and he needs somebody there to advise him correctly on how to run a football club. It's like me. When I bought my restaurants, I employed people who were Michelin star chefs, people who knew what they were doing in the business. He wouldn't employ somebody to go and run his salmon business who had no idea about salmon. He just wouldn't do it. And so, Sheffield Wednesday from 4 or 5 seasons ago, looking as if they would be getting back in the top flight, we're no nearer to it. Having spent all the money we've spent and the salaries that get paid out. And I'll be honest with you, if I was a manager now worth my salt, I wouldn't go anywhere near it.
Really? Well, that's a stark statement. I mean, Dave Chansiri is in the tuna business with his family. He's gone through a few managers, and yet there've been an enormous, you say you wouldn't go anywhere near it, but I gather the interest has been intense. Out-of-work managers, sometimes beggars can't be choosers, but you've also got a manager of great repute in Paul Cook, for instance, who leads the betting, has been contacted on a couple of occasions to discuss the job by Sheffield Wednesday. And he, as I know, is really keen to get it, really keen. Do you think he'd be a good choice?
Yeah, but Alan, you've got to remember, right? Let's remember this now. Sheffield Wednesday is a massive club. They pay big salaries, right? Everybody thinks they can go in there and do the job, right? Listen, I don't know what's happened. I know from a previous regime before that the chairman wants to have control on everything. If I was a manager going in there, right, that I am in charge of players coming in, players going out, all footballing matters. I'm in charge of. That, I believe, was the problem with Tony Pulis, right? You can't tell a manager how he plays the game or how he should play the game, right? If you employ him to do a certain job. But you're going to have people apply for the job. I'm talking, and don't get me wrong, I've got great admiration for Cookie, but you won't get the likes of Chris Hughton, who's now at Nottingham Forest, and players of that ilk, managers of that ilk applying for the job. I'd like to see the list of the managers who applied for the job. I mean, if you think you're going to go in there with a salary of about, £10,000 or £15,000 a week, I would think a manager of Sheffield Wednesday taking over, you're going to go in there and think to yourself, well, even if I get a 6 months break clause and he sacks me, I'm going to walk away with 6 months' money. That's just the way it is. I mean, the first thing I would say to Chansiri when I went in there is, have I got control of footballing matters? And if I haven't got control in footballing matters, I'm not taking the job. Gary Monk, I've spoken to, delivered what he was supposed to deliver and still got the sack. He delivered on his remit that he was told by the chairman with all of those circumstances and still was sacked. So there's no continuity there. There's no stabilisation, right? And that comes from the chairman. Step back, put a director of football in there, right? Howard Wilkinson, I've been championing for days. What Howard Wilkinson doesn't know about football isn't worth knowing about, right? Lives in the Sheffield area, 20 minutes drive from his house to the club. Get him in his advisory capacity. He can smell a player from 50 yards, right? He knows how to run a football club, and he can give you the best advice that you can. And if you want to be successful, that is what you've got to do. Otherwise, the merry-go-round that's going now is going to happen with Cookie. If Cookie comes in, it's going to happen the same again. If he's not allowed to bring in the players he wants to bring in. You know, what I've heard is the chairman comes up from his people and gives a list of 3 or 4 players. Choose one of these players that you want. That's not managing a football club. Whoever he's got in, they're deciding what they think's a good fit for the football club. Well, you can't manage that way. As a manager, you have a particular way that you want to play. You should go to the chairman and tell him that. For instance, let's talk about Pep Guardiola at Man City, right? Decorated manager, right? He will go to his director of football and say, right, I need a centre back, right? They will come to him and say, they've already got the criteria set up, the age they want to bring in. Both parties know that. And they will come to him with a list of players that fit the criteria that he's looking for. The final say is with Pep Guardiola. That's not the way at Sheffield Wednesday. The final say is with the manager who comes in at Sheffield Wednesday, but not the choice of the players that are put in front of him.
Yeah, just playing devil's advocate. I mean, you've made a lot of points there that I've actually made in my column, and many, many people have made. But just playing devil's advocate for a moment, the sort of continental model of management, where a manager's just a head coach and other officials at the club negotiate the transfers, is becoming quite commonplace. I mean, it's not only Sheffield Wednesday, Carlton, is it, that operate in that fashion?
A lot of clubs are operating in that fashion, but what they have got is a technical director in there, or technical sport director, who knows a little bit about the game. Listen, a manager, I know, because I've been a manager twice, I don't want to go and do all the negotiations with the agents, with the players. It's time consuming. It's all of those things. You can leave all that to the chairman, to the chief executive, to the director of sports. But what I want to do is be involved in the players and make the decision. So if I get the sack, right, then I get the sack on the basis of what I've done. So the first thing I would do to Chanzeri, when I sat down with him, I would say to him, right, what is your goal for the football club? Right, we want to get promotion. Right, fair enough. The salary they pay justifies them getting promotion. If I take over at Mansfield Town and Keith Haslam's the chairman, and my budget's 650,000 in that division, and the teams that are getting promoted, their budgets are nearly 2 million, you ain't going to get promotion unless you're in the job a long time and you've got players that have come through the youth ranks. Sheffield Wednesday are in the position that they should be challenging at the top end of the championship because they're paying top wages. So what's wrong with them not challenging at the top end? Well, it's not the managers. In all the managers that he's brought in, it's not the managers, it's the way the football club is run, and in terms of the playing staff that's been brought into the football club. They're not good enough. They're not. I've looked at Sheffield Wednesday over the years, and what you've got to do is look at the model of a Burnley. Look at the model of a Sheffield United getting promoted last season. Look at that model that they have. Big, tall, young, athletic, robust midfield players. Let's take Sheffield United, for instance. I spoke to Chris Wilder in pre-season when they played Chesterfield. And Chris said to me, every player I speak to, or every agent I speak to, before I even speak to the player, I'm looking at 60 grand, right? So Chris made a decision, and he knew it was going to be tough, but he decided to go down a route which I think is the correct route to do when you've just been promoted. Get a good squad together of young, talented footballers. If he gets relegated, Chris said to me, I will have a squad that will get promoted straight away again if we get relegated. That is the way to go about it. Look at the model Sean Dyche has done at Burnley. So there should be no talk about Chris Wilder getting the sack at Sheffield United. Absolutely no talk about that at all. He should be given the season, and then he should be given halfway into next season. And as long as they're in a position of likely to get back into the Premier League, then that is the route you've got to take. It's not that easy to get promoted from the Championship and stay in the Premier League. And I know they had a great season last season, and they're not far off having that season this season. Just little bits that go for you. And, you know, they had a great start, and the momentum then goes with them. But going back to Sheffield Wednesday, first thing I would say to the chairman as I walked in, with my advisors, I'd say to him, am I in charge of football matters in the football club? And if he said to me no, I'm walking straight out.
Straight talking from Carlton as ever. And actually, there's a slight parallel with, as we bring James Gregg in, there's a slight parallel with Sheffield United in that kind of issues behind the scenes boiled up to a very anxious week for you, James, and all Blades last week when there were rumours were rampant and not without foundation that there were issues behind the scenes in terms of ambitions for the January window, in terms of control of transfers, which Chris Wilder has always had. Happily, there have been a couple of wins, but I don't think entirely those issues have gone away. James, what kind of a week did you have kind of following social media and following all of this?
Oh, what kind of a week was that? I mean, you know, it was interesting how they just popped up out of nowhere, these kind of rumours. And obviously, it's not out of nowhere, but, you know, when you've got the Prince, who gave an interview to Radio Sheffield, 2 or 3 weeks before, sort of just before Christmas and New Year, wasn't it? Saying Chris Wilder is definitely the man. He is staying until the end of this season. Thank you very much. That put a lot of fans' thoughts to rest, didn't it? It put a lot of minds to rest. And then you see these rumours coming out and you think, well, the only explanation is that either the Prince has done a big U-turn on what he said, and I don't think that he would do something like that because he doesn't strike me as a reckless kind of character, or that there'd been some kind of disagreement which had ultimately, you know, made the unthinkable happen. And that was, you know, Chris sort of walking away from the boardroom. Nobody will ever really know what's happened. I wouldn't suspect, certainly not in the foreseeable future, what happened sort of last week, at the start of last week. But you can imagine that it's no coincidence. It's the first week in January. There'll be questions asked. They'll be having meetings. They'll be having lots of discussions about transfer targets and wages, and he wants this and he wants that. There'll be loads of discussions going on like that. And, you know, maybe if they've had it out, maybe it's a healthy discussion. But I think when you've got rumours flying about, it's not particularly helpful. I don't think the fans particularly, it certainly didn't do any favours. But what it did do favours for was perhaps showing the board and showing the owner, if they were considering getting rid of Chris Wilder, even if it was just a little back thought that was just maybe sort of eating away at the back of their head, it put all that straight to bed, didn't it? And what a way to respond as well with that win, you know, in the FA Cup. And look, I know they're a team that are 18th in League One. And then obviously I know Newcastle aren't particularly brilliant, and it was a penalty that separated the teams against Newcastle. But, you know, what a way to respond. You know, you've had a week like that where basically nobody knows what's happening. You know, almost radio silence on what had happened from Chris in his pre-match and post-match stuff. And it was kind of on to the next one. So I think, you know, in terms of, you know, it sounds daft, but 5 points in a Premier League season at this stage and all that, it's never going to be rosy, but you compare it to what it could have been and what a lot of people were imagining it to be, and it actually is rosy, Alan.
Well, James, neither party has clarified the situation in the light of the rumours batted it off, which, you know, I mean, to anybody who's had any experience in journalism knows that underlying that, there have to be issues. I don't think they're daggers drawn, to use a Sheffield expression, but I think in Chris Wilder's case, it was probably a combination of things. He'd have been under immense pressure. It's a miserable situation with COVID. His team was constantly losing. He must have been dispirited. You know, even the most spirited guy would get down about it. I think in terms of control that he's had, he's been a hands-on manager. He's made a point of that. And it's worked spectacularly for Sheffield United. And the mere suggestion that he might lose some of that control, I think would be a non-negotiable issue for him. So the
Correct.
rumour,
And it kind of goes back to what Carlton was saying, though, doesn't it? You know, if you're a manager, you are therefore a manager of that element of what, you know, whatever business you're running. If you're a shop floor manager, you're managing the shop floor. If you're managing, you know, a certain department, you're managing that department. And that's exactly what you're saying, Carlton, isn't it? Really, in that respect. So
well,
it's
110%. Well, 110%. I know Chris Wilder, and if they take that control away from him in terms of him controlling the football club and how the playing staff, who comes in, who goes out, how that's run, if that take that away from him, Chris will walk. 110%. That is not going to happen at Sheffield United. It won't happen anywhere with Chris.
Yeah.
It just won't happen. And this is what I'm saying about managing.
You've hit it.
If they hold him accountable to the result.
Behind everything, the rumours that Chris had offered to walk and hadn't come into training kind of haven't been denied. And you've got to feel that was somewhere in the ballpark. And I think he's put his foot down, Carlton, on that situation. And certainly that would be my understanding as well. So do you think that things will now be resolved because the parties have made, you know, things clear? Chris has made things clear. A couple of wins in football does tend to take things away, problems away, doesn't it?
I think the wins have helped. And that's what it's all about. Obviously, you're in the board. The chairman, obviously, they've made big investments and they've got promoted. Nobody wants to get relegated. Nobody envisaged Sheffield United being in the position they're in after the season they had last season. But you've got to be. This is where you've got to be though careful, and you've got to have a lot of foresight and a lot of belief in the man. I heard the chairman, the same as you, Greg, talking about Chris in glowing. Glowing reports and whatever. That hasn't changed. What's changed is they haven't got off to the greatest start this season, right? And therefore, right, confidence is a bit lacking, right? You look at Everton, you look at Leeds this season, they've got off to great starts. They haven't got off to the great starts. They are that close. I've seen them in games this season where they've been that close to getting the results that they got last season. So it's a fine line. And what should be coming out is the chairman not even thinking about it. He should be coming out and saying, I remember the Burnley chairman coming out and saying, even if we get relegated, Sean Dyche will not be sacked. And you know what? That just released the pressure on everybody. Right? Yep. Listen, if we go down, Chris Wilder's the man to bring us back up. Right? That's not to say we've given up yet. But I understand the chairman getting twitchy. I understand the chairman, big investment, the money that comes from the Premier League, and you want to stay in the Premier League. But what you don't start doing is now, because things aren't quite rosy, try to change the formula that's been successful. And what you can't do, which is what I'm saying to you, is with a man like Chris Wilder, who's a very principled person, you can't change the goalposts on him. He'll walk. Simple as that.
Yeah, well, he hasn't, as things stand. The message may well have got home. Nobody in their right minds wants to see him go, and that includes Prince Abdullah and the board. That's absolutely clear. It's not a situation where they want him to go, and certainly if he did go, it would be challenging, to say the least, from a PR point of view. Because the remarkable thing about it, and people outside the area don't understand this, Carlton, the depth of support that Chris commands from Sheffield United fans. It's 99.9% of them want him to stay. And I think people in the media outside the area don't quite understand that scenario these days. They assume that a manager who's losing all the time is under pressure and fans want him to walk. That is not the situation at Sheffield United, far from it. And you're in China, you know that.
Yeah, but I'm not going from, listen, I know Chris, I know him well. I'm not talking from a personal point of view, right? I'm not talking from, I'm talking as a football person and what he's done at that football club and what he's achieved. And this is what happens, and it gets me down a bit. Like, if you look at justice, I love Sam Allardyce to death, right? I think he's a great bloke. I think he's a great manager. But poetic justice would be for West Brom to go down for the way they treated Slaven Bilic as he got them up at the first attempt, right? You have to show, if you're asking people to show loyalty, you look at managers who could have gone. Eddie Howe could have gone, stayed on at Bournemouth. He was in for loads of top jobs. Now, all of a sudden, he's had one bad season. Now he's a bad manager again. You know, people don't lose things overnight. David Moyes, everybody's singing, what a great manager he is at West Ham. He was always a good manager. He just got dealt a bad blow at Man United and found it hard to recover. He's found a club in West Ham similar to Everton, where he's back to doing what he does best. He's a good manager. So Chris Wilder is a good manager. And I will guarantee you, 110%, if Sheffield United go down, they'll go down with a fight this season. And I 100% got them coming back up next season if they go down. If you look at Norwich, went down. Have they sacked the manager at Norwich? No. They're probably going to come up as champions. Do you know what I mean? Bournemouth got rid of Eddie Howe. Look at where they are. Eddie Howe would have got them back up. You know, you've just got to just be a little bit patient, because what you've got to remember, say you get rid of Chris Wilder, you've allowed Chris Wilder to bring all those players in. All those players, I know, have a great deal of affection for Chris Wilder. They'll run through a brick wall for him. So now you've got another manager coming in who doesn't know those players and doesn't know how to get the best out of those players. So sometimes you've just got to ride it out. And I know it's difficult because, you know, you don't want to get relegated. But you've got to look at the facts of where Chris come to take the club to get them promoted to the Premier League. Nobody thought they were going to go on that unbelievable run and go up. So you have to look at the facts in the cold light of day. And this is what I would be saying to the Sheffield Wednesday chairman. If he ever allowed me 5 minutes in his presence, I would say to him, listen, chairman, you're a great bloke. You love the club. You've put a lot of money in it. Do me a favour, sit in the back, get somebody who knows about football.
Words of great clarity.
And you'll get what you want.
Palmer, a lot of common sense in there as well. Just before we go, from the field, the runners and riders, as the bookies have it at the moment, Paul Cook, Roy Keane, Chris Coleman, many foreign coaches. Regardless of all the issues we talked about, who would you go for from that lot?
It's difficult. I mean, none of the managers who've been linked with the job, in all fairness, I would take. The Sheffield Wednesday's a big club. It needs a big name. It does. But that's the problem. A big name won't touch it now because of the situation that's gone on. No, those managers are good managers and have done well. You know, I love Cookie. I love, you know, Chris Coleman and whatever. But we needed somebody, like when Ron Atkinson came to the club, massive ego, massive personality, lifted the whole club. That's what we need. We need somebody like that. Do you know, if I was the chairman, the one thing you've got to do is go and get... I'll be honest with you. I know Nigel said he would never take the job, but I'd still go and get big Nigel Pearson. You know, get Nigel Pearson there, Craig Shakespeare in as his assistant, and I guarantee you, if he's allowed to run the club as the manager of the football club, he'll get them promoted in 2 seasons. I honestly believe that.
Thank you, Carlton. Straightforward views as ever, never less than honest and straightforward. James Gregg, just before we go, you know, I'm thinking Graham Norton and his show, and I think I could do with the lever to pull. Are you a bit worried sitting there?
I'm a bit worried, to be fair. I think a lot of our viewers, particularly from the blue and white half of the city, they probably see me and they probably think the same. So yeah, I'm a bit worried.
It's the ejector seat, but I must say, as ever, you've got the best set. You're the most professional in terms of your set.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very good. Carlton and I, we're going to have to work at ours. We really are. But it's great to link up again and put the world to rights as far as we can. James, thank you again. Carlton, love to your family, to Lucy, and you know, I hope that you have a lot more better times in your life in 2021 as us all. Thank you ever so much for doing.
Cheers, Carlton, mate. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All the
Take
best.
care, Alan. Love to
And
the families.
Thank you for watching.
Bye.
Well, I'll go for you real soon. I hope. See you then. Bye-bye.